Okay, so today I'm going to show you guys some techniques for creating abstract art using the rule of thirds. If you haven't yet, then look through last week's slideshow about the rule of thirds, and then look through this week's slideshow that I posted about how to use the rule of thirds to make abstract art. Some of the different tips and things that could help you. So I'm going to start by just showing you, this is the paper that I'm going to work on. It really depends on what kind of materials you have at hand for what type of paper you want to use, but if you have a thicker paper and you plan on using wet materials, that would be better. If you're just using crayons and markers and things like that, you could just use plain printer paper, but I'm going to use a little bit of watercolor paint, so I've got watercolor paper, which is a little bit thicker. If you have acrylic paint or something like that, you could use that, and in that case you could actually even use a piece of cardboard or a chunk of wood or really any surface that you could paint on. First I'm going to show you, using the rule of thirds, you always want to imagine that when you're looking at your composition, which is the frame of your picture, that there's a grid on it. Okay, you don't want to, you could actually draw the grid on lightly with lines, but I don't think you really need to. If you just imagine that the paper is split into thirds, so 2 lines going through the middle horizontally and 2 lines going through the middle vertically, that will give you the grid that you can use to decide where to put points of emphasis on your picture, interesting places that draw the viewer's attention to make the composition work with the rule of thirds. So I'll bring this back later, but for now, I'm just gonna start. The fun thing about abstract art is you can do whatever you want. It's very open, it's very free, you can use whatever materials you have. There's no real right or wrong. The only thing that is required of something being called abstract art is that it should not be representational. You shouldn't be making a picture of something that is recognizable. It shouldn't be a face. It shouldn't be something that you have seen before. It should be completely unique and non-representational, right? So I'm just going to start using some line. I've got just some simple tools. I got some crayons here. I tried to pick out stuff that I thought you guys might have around, and I'm just going to start doing whatever I feel. There's not really a right or wrong way of how to start or what to do. Think about the different elements and principles of art as you're working, and it will help give you ideas of different types of things that you can do within your composition. So I'm just using some different kinds of lines right now to get started. Another thing that I recommend if you're doing abstract art is to try to avoid using every single color in the rainbow. Rainbows are awesome, but they're a little bit boring. We see a lot of rainbows, right? So think about maybe limiting your color palette to like 4 or 5 different colors, or just not using every single color. And if you do use every single color, try to stay away from rainbow order, because that tends to be just a little bit boring. We've all seen lots of rainbow drawings and pictures before. You guys are a little bit more advanced than that. I think you can come up with something a little bit more unique and different. So I'm just getting started. Some spirals, some straight lines. Okay, now I think I'm going to switch materials. I'm going to use some Sharpies. Okay, so I'm going to get a yellow one. Well, actually, we're going to start with the blue one. And I'm going to just sort of lay in a shape here, and sort of color in a shape here with a Sharpie marker. Now, always keep in mind when I'm doing a demonstration, I'm trying to work quickly and not make it too boring for you guys. So when you are working, you can really take your time more than I do. You can take breaks in between materials. You can spend time just looking at your artwork from across the room. sometimes at a distance can help before you decide to move on to do something different with it. I don't have that luxury because, you know, I want you guys to stay interested in what I'm doing as the teacher. So now I'm going to use the yellow Sharpie. I'm just going to sort of color in a shape here. So everything that I've done so far is abstract. Okay, so nothing that you see here is not like, it might remind you of something, like this might remind you of a wheel, but that doesn't mean it is a wheel. There's nothing recognizable in this. I've never made this piece of artwork before. This is completely new to me. Everything you do in an abstract piece of artwork should be something new. Okay, so let's slip my grid over top of it again and see how we're doing with our rule of thirds. We'll see if I'm putting interesting things on the third of the page or if I need to make some adjustments. Okay, so you can see I sort of have that spiral, falls right where the two lines of the grid want to cross, right there. So that's a compositional hotspot. That's a good place to put interesting items in your composition. I also have this line as sort of following the top line in the rule of thirds. And this one is sort of cutting through my wheel here. So I'm off to a good start so far. I'm going to add some more materials though. Okay, so now I'm going to start using a little bit of watercolor. Now I know that not everybody might not have watercolor paints at home that you can use. That's okay. If you want to do something that's like watercolor, even though you don't have watercolor at home, something that you could try if you want to get adventurous is you could try painting with coffee. You could have your parents make a cup of coffee, no cream or sugar or anything, just black coffee. And you could try mixing that coffee with water to dilute it. And the more water you mix into it, the lighter brown color that it'll make. And the less water you put, the darker brown. So it's not as exciting as a beautiful palette full of colors because you only have brown to work with, but it's something, right? And you can get some really interesting things with shades of brown. All right, so another thing I want to recommend that you do, especially if you're painting, is mix your colors. Don't just use the colors straight out of the pan, right? That's not as interesting. The awesome thing about paint, the reason that paint is such a flexible tool for artists is because you can mix it. You can create your own colors. So I just mixed sort of green into my blue a little bit to give it a little bit more of an aqua color there. Now the nice thing about using watercolors with crayons is you can see when I paint over that orange crayon, it does an interesting effect where it kind of beads up and creates an interesting texture there. So you can play around with how the different materials mix too. That can also be fun. I want this to have a bit of a texture, so I'm going to dab it with a paper towel. Sort of subtract a little bit there. See how now it has a little bit of patterning and texture to it? All right, let's get some other colors going here. Let me try some purple. I'm going to take some purple and I'm going to show you guys what I'm doing with the watercolors here. I'm going to take some purple and I'm going to mix it in with the blue a little bit. Now, the more water I add to this, the lighter the watercolor will be. The less water, the darker it'll be. I want a nice dark purple, so I'm going to keep getting more paint and not get much water. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to come in side here. I'm going to do another spiral. Don't know why, but I'm feeling like spirally today. Kind of feeling spirally. Sometimes it can be a mistake to think too hard about what you're doing when you're doing an abstract painting. You just kind of want to paint whatever seems like it might be a good idea at the time, and if it doesn't look right, then you do something else on top of it later when it's dry, or you draw over it with a Sharpie when it's dry, or you do something different. There's no rules with it, so you shouldn't be afraid. Sometimes I think people are afraid of working on their artwork because they're afraid they're going to ruin it or something, and that's really not how you want to be. You want to be able to take risks with what you're doing. And maybe you learn something by making some paintings that you don't like. See how I used a little bit of water to sort of create a gradient there? So it sort of fades off. Another thing that can be really helpful when you're working on an abstract piece of artwork is to look at it from a different angle. If you've only been working on it horizontally like I have, try flipping it up vertically, and it might really change the way you think about it when you look at it that way. I'm going to get some colored pencils next. Let's see. How about some more green? I'm going to color with the green right on top of the yellow of the Sharpie. That's the nice thing about layering too. By starting with the Sharpie markers, I can come on top of them with the colored pencil. I kind of feel like doing something like this. Diagonal lines can be very interesting in a composition. Seeing how they work and cut through objects. Let's see, what's next? Maybe a purple pencil. Now this is still wet. When this is a little bit drier up here, I can come in with colored pencil or Sharpie right on top of this and do some other work with it. But right now, this feels kind of dry. I'll come into this. Don't be afraid to just sort of let loose. Put some energy into what you're doing. Like I said, there's no mistakes. Sometimes being careful is not always the solution. I'm going to come back with a Sharpie. Really playing around with materials is going to be fun for this project. Don't be afraid to do something in one spot and then not do it anywhere else again. Okay, I just noticed I don't really have any black anywhere. I'm gonna get the black Sharpie out and I'm gonna do some stuff with that. Make a really clean black shape right here. Black can add a lot of contrast to what you're doing. Contrast can be one of those good elements that can draw the viewer's attention to where you want it to go. Anytime you use contrasting colors, colors that are very different from one another, or colors that are, maybe one color is really light, one color is really dark, that creates contrast, and that can be a really good way to draw the viewer's attention to a particular spot in your picture. I'm going to go back to the crayons. Now I'm going to change it up a little bit, and I'm going to use a color that I haven't used much yet. I'm going to use some orange, some more orange, because I only have the one orange line. I want to come back in with some more orange, I think. Think of it all as a big experiment. And if a beautiful piece of artwork comes out of it, yay. If not, you do another experiment and another. And sometimes you come back to one of your old experiments when it's dry, add some more lines with a Sharpie, and you might find that you like it a lot better than you did the last time you looked at it. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this right now. I think I want to do more with it, but I think that this is enough for the demonstration. Oh, I'm sorry, one other thing I wanted to show you guys. You can use other materials, including like pieces of paper. So I have this sheet of just like construction paper here. I can cut some interesting shapes out of it, you know, whatever might work. and I can glue them right on here. I can use them as part of my picture too. So I could just glue those right on here. I've got some clear Elmer's glue. You could also just use regular Elmer's glue. Sometimes using other materials like paper or string connected to the canvas can create sort of a dimensional effect too that can be really interesting. Just put a little glue, stick these puppies on there. And then after the glue's dry, I can come back and I could color on top of them. I could use the Sharpie marker on top of them. I could paint on top of them. Another fun thing to do with the glue is just put some glue right on the canvas. What happens if there's a line of glue here? When that's dry later on, I can come back and paint over that with watercolor, and what will be interesting is that the glue will sort of resist the watercolor paint, and it'll create an interesting effect with that. So we'll see what that does later. I'll try to post some pictures of the finished final product when I do finish it. You could also use things like tissue paper if you have it around the house, string, basically anything you want, really, as long as you can stick it onto your paper, could be a part of your abstract composition. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, or I can see you during my office hours. And if you are in 6th, 7th, or 8th grade art, please make sure that you join the Google Classrooms that I've put up for them. And I will talk to you soon. Bye.